Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show. My guest, Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for joining me.
Hello, Aaron. So nice to see you today.
Oh, I really appreciate your being here. Tell me a little bit about the UN framework and what its goals are.
Well, you know, this started over 20 years ago with the summit in Rio de Janeiro, the Earth Summit, and the Convention on Climate Change was born there. And the objective of the convention is to raise awareness and make governments take action to address the problem of climate change. Now, the convention is a very general framework. If you imagine that you have over 190 parties, that can give you an idea that whatever we can put together needs to be general in nature. And at that moment, governments did not manage to put on the table specific goals in terms of how much they would reduce their emissions and how they would do that. So over the last 20 years, negotiations were going on. First, we managed to get the Kyoto Protocol, which was a first step, but then the Kyoto Protocol turned out not to be enough. And parties continued to negotiate to get a framework where everybody would take decisive actions. And this is the Paris Agreement. This is what we got with the Paris Agreement in 2015, in December, at the conference in Paris. And the Paris Agreement, what has added to this regime in order to address climate change is the fact that for the first time, all countries recognized that they need to be part of the solution and put on the table some commitments regarding what they will do in terms of reducing their emissions. Specific commitments. Developed countries have put forward commitments that are unconditional, so they are binding and they are obliging themselves to comply with them. Developing countries put on the table commitments that are part of it binding and that they will do no matter what happens in terms of international cooperation, but also some that they are willing to do if they get the right support from the international community.
So you have an extraordinary background, and I want to mention some of the things that you've done before. I mean, you were the former Mexican ambassador to Germany in a very high-level position on the eminent panel of the United Nations, appointed by the Secretary General. You were the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, a very significant position. And I mean, your background in international relations, climate change, global governance, sustainable development, gender equality, and the protection of human rights. Those are all issues I want you to talk about, though. I know,
okay, great.
I know you have very little time relative to the scope of those subjects. But I'd really like to get your take as a global citizen and as a diplomat of the state of poverty around the world today.
Well, you know, this is one of the issues that we discussed really very intensely in this high-level panel that produced a report in order to give some inputs to the membership at the UN and come up with the Sustainable Development Goals. And it is very clear that it's just unacceptable with the amount of wealth that there is around the world. It is unacceptable that we still have so many million people living in poverty. And you know, so that means not only they don't have money, but they don't have access to the very basic services, sanitation, health, education. So this was one of the very clear objectives that we thought. Also making an analysis.
And clean water.
Clean water, yes.
Huge issue.
Problem. And making the analysis that with the resources that the world has, this should not be happening. So it is possible to, for the first time, overcome poverty and really bring everybody around the world out of poverty. And that is really an issue that has to do not only with making a service to those people, to those communities, but it is an investment in peace, in stability, and in prosperity at the end.
Are there more people today or fewer people today in poverty than several decades ago? Of course, the population of the globe, the Earth, is much greater.
There are fewer people in situation of poverty. I don't have the numbers in my head right now, but there are fewer people, so it is remarkable the progress that has been made by humanity, and that was also a very important case to make, so that leaders and people around the world see this as a challenge that can be met. You know, sometimes when you are facing such big challenges, you run the risk of being indifferent, of just thinking, well, you know, no matter what we do, this is not going to be solved anyway, so why would we bother? No, this is not the case. We really have an opportunity.
So what are some of the success? Is there a success story you would like to point to or that you think of in terms of a region, a country, an area that has come out of poverty, has been able to successfully address the challenge of poverty?
Well, I think that you know, when we speak of poverty, it's very difficult to speak about success because the very sad situation is that we still have poor people in every country in the world. So, but we can maybe speak about some good experiences. And I would say one region where countries have good stories to tell is Latin America. It's also a region that I know best because I come from Mexico and I have been working a lot with my colleagues in Latin America. But Latin America is a region where the middle class has been growing at a very important pace. And that means people have been able to get out of poverty, to join the middle class, to become, really be able to get education, access to all these services. Still, the problem with Latin America is that in spite of that progress, we are seeing still huge inequalities. Latin America remains one of the most unequal regions in the world. Then you have other cases like Africa, where we still have a situation where too many people are living in conditions of poverty or extreme poverty. And the inequalities are not so big, but that means that's also not such a good news, because that means then that you have a very high proportion of the population living in these conditions.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We will be back with the Executive Secretary in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I am with Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa. Madam Secretary, I'd be really interested in your perspective on the relationship between freedom and poverty. What are your thoughts about that, and about what countries, what regions, where there has been success, where there hasn't been success due to corruption, lack of transparency, or whatever? Give me your global take on that.
Well, that's a difficult one, I have to say. But I would say that the difficulty with this question is that it's very difficult to make a general statement about situations that are so diverse. And I think that in order to address all the problems that derive from poverty, it's important to look at the very specific situation, historic, economic, social, political, all kinds of different elements that come together in a specific situation. If you look at crises around the world, there is not one crisis that has only one cause. There are multiple causes also that make an impact and that produce then a situation that you can call a crisis. So I agree. I think that yes, poverty is an obstacle for freedom, for people to live free. If you are not able to get access to education, to really fulfill your basic needs, that means that your capacity to develop your abilities is very limited. So in many ways, it means that you cannot be free like other people that are able to have access to all of those services and basic needs fulfilled. And at the same time, how to address it? Yes, there is a very clear responsibility on the side of governments, but I think it has become in the last few years more evident than ever that governments alone cannot address these very complex situations and cannot fulfill the needs of the populations. So every citizen, every company, every actor in society has a responsibility. And the more we get a real consciousness about the fact that doing what is good for the others is really doing what is good for everybody's own interest, the more we will be able to get into a better situation into the future, into a more stable world, into a more just and fair world, and into a world where everyone can develop its abilities.
Well, one of the concerns, I think just observationally, is that where you have corrupt institutions, you have corrupt governments, when aid is given to those countries or those governments, much of that aid, much of that help does not get to the people who need it. So it seems that the issues of transparency and corruption are really critical, because you want to have those resources be successful. You want to have those resources reach the people who need it. In your sense, I mean, in terms of eliminating poverty, it's certainly, I think, well established, and tell me if I'm wrong, that educating a population, and especially educating girls and young women, are integral to paths to eliminate poverty. Give me your sense of how accurate that is, and what can we do to further that process around the world more effectively?
Well, first, let me say a word on the first point about corruption. I think that you're absolutely right. Yes, corruption is really a terrible situation in every society. We could say, yes, it's part of human nature. Yeah, this is why there are so many frameworks around the world in order to address the issue of corruption. But again, this is an area where the demands by citizens and the work that every society has to do is crucial. At the international level, the United Nations has worked on many frameworks. But those frameworks will not make a difference unless you really have some kind of very specific local actions in the communities. And how do you do that? Well, people are the ones that elect their representatives. They should speak up. They should really get involved in that. We are seeing a tendency now also that young people are not interested in politics. Well, somebody has to do the politics, you know. So I really hope that we could inspire young people to get more involved in politics and be more, take more responsibility on these issues. On women and girls, that's, you know, the first very concrete data which is relevant is the fact that women and girls are over 50% of humanity. And that is very often just not remembered, you know. But if you really look at it from the very basic perspective, so it's very clear you cannot make progress in humanity if you do not address the specific needs and if you do not allow the perspectives of women and girls to be incorporated into every policy. And yes, they are different perspectives and they are different needs. And you are absolutely right. The best way to make progress is empowering women by education, by giving them access to technology, to means of production. You know, in some countries, women are still not allowed to own land, even if they are the ones that are working on the land, and they take the responsibility of feeding their families. So it is absolutely necessary, and this is why I really am very glad that the Secretary General Antonio Guterres has put forward an initiative on gender parity in the United Nations. And let me tell you, even in the United Nations, that's not an easy task to achieve gender parity.
Well, no, and what about the challenge? I mean, there are certain countries, just as you were referencing, and certain religions that prohibit women from having positions of authority, in some cases from even going to school and getting education. How do we overcome that challenge where in some areas of the world those numbers of countries, of governments, of religions are growing and making it more difficult to achieve those goals? How do you overcome that challenge given the obvious results that you're aware of, that by empowering women, by educating girls and young women, you address a wide range of issues in terms of poverty, self-sufficiency, independence, helping an economy, et cetera. How do you do that with the growth in certain areas of regimes and religions which do the opposite?
Well, I would say that even in those countries, we are already seeing a raising awareness of the positive role that women can play and the contributions that women can make to the economy, to the well-being of society in general. So I think this is a very, very welcome development. It has been also a long journey since all the issues about women's rights are human rights and empowerment of women and multiple initiatives worldwide regarding women and girls. So I think that we are starting to see, even in those societies, also some encouraging signals. So we need to go on. We need to continue to demonstrate and make the case that it's not about making a favor to women and girls. It is really about the well-being of societies as a whole. If you ignore the contribution that half of the population can make in any country, then you are really not doing a favor to your own country.
All right, fair enough. We're going to take our last break. We will be back with the Executive Secretary in just a moment.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. I very much would like to hear from you about the program, so please send me an email with your thoughts. You can suggest what topics I should cover, what guests I should invite to be on the show, or even what specific questions you would like me to ask. This is your program, so send your suggestions to aaron@harbertv.com. I promise to personally read every one, so email me today. And most of all, thanks for watching. I'm Aaron Harber, host of the Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
Join me and watch the Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch the Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
Welcome back to the show. I'm with Executive Secretary Patricia Espinosa from the United Nations. So how can we use multilateralism to address some of the conditions and concerns that we've been talking about, in particular for improving the conditions for development?
Well, Aaron, thank you for allowing me to speak about one of the most exciting developments that we have seen in the history of the United Nations. And it has to do with two very important multilateral agreements. One is the Sustainable Development Goals, and the second one is the Paris Agreement. Both are really about development. Both are really about the well-being of people. So the Sustainable Development Goals have set an agenda of the minimum that every country should achieve in order to give its population, its children, its women and girls, a possibility of developing as good citizens in making contributions to their communities and to the world. And it is very remarkable. The Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals that have to do with overcoming poverty, good jobs, responsible consumption, good infrastructure. It has to do also with climate change, yes, gender issues. It has to do with, you name it. And it's very, very specific. And at the same time, every country has the possibility of building a national agenda on the basis of this very broad but very concrete agenda. And climate change is a part of this agenda, but not only as a standalone goal. Climate change is an issue that affects the fulfillment of all of those sustainable development goals. If you speak about jobs, let's say, okay, in addressing climate change, you need to create new jobs. You need to get people that are working in the coal mines to do a different job and to do better jobs, hopefully. What is especially remarkable about these two agreements is that for the first time what we are seeing is that private sector is also aligning their activities to these two big agreements. There is a report, very important report, that is called Better Business, Better World, that makes the case that just addressing 4 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals represents really billions of investment opportunities around the world. So I think this is the first time that the world has come together and the United Nations has been the platform to really build a development agenda where everybody can align to.
So in that vein, and given the consensus, certainly among so many countries, businesses, NGOs, et cetera, you have, of course, in the United States, a president who has begun the process, the multi-year process of leaving the Paris Climate Agreement. What impact do you think that will have on progress?
Well, the first comment is, of course, we very much hope that there could be still a possibility that we will continue to have the U.S. as one of the very valued partners in the Paris Agreement. And so we are ready to engage with the U.S. administration at any point to address their concerns. But what we have seen after the announcement about the intention to withdraw from the Paris Agreement is that the ratification by countries around the world have continued to come in. And in fact, we have today universal adherence to the Paris Agreement. 197 countries have signed the Paris Agreement, and 175 have ratified it, so which means we only have 22 countries that need to ratify. That is very unusual for a multilateral agreement like the Paris Agreement, because it really is very broad. It implies actions across society, across the different sectors of the economy. So what we are seeing is really a strong support at the political level. We are also seeing strong support from the business community in all areas, including the energy community, which is very important for the development process of any country, and also by civil society. Young people are very open to change. So this is very encouraging. I don't want to say it's easy, and I don't want to say we are there, but I see a lot of very encouraging signs.
All right, Madam Secretary, thank you so much.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you.
My pleasure. That was Patricia Espinosa from the United Nations. I'm Aaron Harber. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.